What is up, Steelers Nation? Thank you so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. I'm Noah Strackbine, joined by my main man, Steven Thompson. Find us on youtube.com/All Steelers Talk, or subscribe anywhere you get your podcast. The Pittsburgh Steelers, the NFL draft has come and gone, and man, the headlines have not slowed down, with the rumor mill flying around about the Pittsburgh Steelers being involved and looking for and potentially closing in on a wide receiver trade. General Manager Omar Khan went on the Pat McAfee show yesterday, and well, he had some words to say about where the team currently stands in that situation. Meanwhile, reports say that another name out of Seattle is on the list for a potential trade for the Steelers, and then the Jacksonville Jaguars added a name to the free agency market that might make a little bit of sense for Pittsburgh. And obviously, we got to talk about the big news tomorrow. Najee Harris, Justin Fields, their fifth-year options are due by 4 p.m. on May 2nd, and we got to see where we currently stand and where the Pittsburgh Steelers currently stand on potentially picking those fifth-year options up. It's been a beautiful week here in the Burgh. The NFL draft has come and gone. How you feeling, my friend?
I'm feeling good. I'm really fired up about, this new significant playmaker, Anthony Averett, excuse me. So I'm real fired up about that. I think the Steelers got a good one. I think that's the missing piece, quite honestly. It seems like they're set.
Where did your mind go? You saw that tweet. Me and Nick talked about it yesterday. You saw that tweet. Where'd your mind go? Who was the first name that popped up?
Oh, Brandon Ayuk, man. I thought it was one of the 49ers guys. That seemed to be the most logical place. I mean, the guys who have been in the news for, which I guess, only counts for so much, but I figured we were talking about these guys for so long, there was so much smoke. There couldn't have been anything besides a fire, but turns out we were wrong, I guess. I was wrong, I guess, at least this time.
Yeah, at least for right now, at least for today. Every day that passes, we're only wrong today. Tomorrow as a whole, they're their game. I agree. My first thought was Brandon Ayuk or Deebo Samuel, and then obviously the Cortland Sutton thing went on, and the tweet popped up by Benjamin Albright, and we're in the group chat going, oh, there it is. There's Cortland Sutton. I told the live stream yesterday that I was talking with my neighbors. I started a group chat with them, and I said, hey, let's ride the roller coaster here. And I sent them everything and every update that I was getting that usually we all talk about and have talked about. I brought them into the conversation. At the end of it, they were like, wow, that was nuts. I was like, that's every day of our lives. That's what we do every single day here on this job, just to make sure that we know exactly what's going on. It was a crazy time. And then Omar Khan obviously jumped on the Pat McAfee show yesterday, talks about and is asked about the trade rumors and everything going on and what's going to happen with them. And if there's any real action going on. And he says, well, quite frankly, no, that he's heard everything going on. He probably saw BMAC's tweet saying that the Steelers are closing in on a quote-unquote significant playmaker. And he says right now there's nothing in the works. There's nothing happening when it comes to the Steelers' end of that. You heard that yesterday. Did you believe it? Did Omar Khan convince you that nothing is happening with the Pittsburgh Steelers in the wide receiver trade market?
Not at all. That guy is lying, man. He is lying. He is... I don't know, and I get it, he's got to, I don't know, you got to keep this stuff under wraps. You don't want to, tip your hand too much, but that man is lying. They are absolutely looking for, they have absolutely been involved in these trade talks. I feel like I don't think they could afford to not be involved and not, kind of kick the tires at the very least to see if they can grab, an upgrade at wide receiver. Maybe they weren't talking about, all the guys that we had kind of listed. I mean, I saw Devontae Adams thrown out there and stuff like that. Maybe not every name that you see is involved in these trade talks, but there is not a chance that they are not. And it would be irresponsible of them to not, do this, to not explore these trade opportunities and look for an upgrade at wide receiver, because I think some people feel, differently about it, but I don't think you can walk into 2024 with the wide receiver room looking the way that it does right now. I just don't think that's a good thing for a team that wants to be competitive to do. I like some of the pieces that they have there, but I don't think it is enough. So I think the idea that they would not explore any of these opportunities is, I don't know, that's pretty ridiculous to me. I don't think they, and I get it. Omar's doing his thing. Omar's got to, doesn't want to leave a trail, doesn't want to, tip his hand, like I said, but there's no way that they are not doing this, that they are not at least exploring these chances.
So I looked at it and my immediate thought was there probably isn't any action happening right now. There might have been action happening an hour and a half ago, but when he was actually on the show, everything was calmed down and there was really nothing going on. And that's what I thought of. Like my thought was, all right, Omar doesn't want to lie to these guys because they'll call him out the next time he's on there if he does lie to them. And he doesn't want to tip his hand. So what's he going to do? He's going to say exactly what's happening in that moment. And what's happening probably exactly in that moment is there's nothing to talk about. You know, I would imagine that they were somewhat closing in on a significant playmaker. I think B-Mac might have jumped the gun with that. I think that he might have interpreted whatever text or conversation he had to say, ooh, the Steelers are very close to a wide receiver trade. That happens. But I don't think that in that moment Omar was necessarily lying. But if you asked him an hour, 2 hours earlier, he probably would be lying. I think that they probably had those conversations. They turned out not to be anything that was going to turn into fruition right there. And he said, okay, sounds good. For right now, for the rest of today, there's nothing going on. And when he was asked about it, he said, oh, yeah, there's nothing happening because at the time there was.
Yeah, he's like, I'm not actively on the phone right now talking about trades for wide receivers. That's
exactly. But I would imagine that they are in talks. I find it very hard to believe. And even when I've been told, like over the last day or two, I've reached out to everyone I possibly could to get some intel from inside the building and any source, any representation that I could get my hands on and I could get some words from and some insight from. And the Steelers were, I mean, unless I'm being lied to, and don't get me wrong, like, again, these things happen, but and I haven't tossed anything out there with confirmation. You know, I'm not out there. I'm trying to work with a side of caution because B-Mac tossed that out there and immediately everybody freaked out. And you're going, okay, here we go. You know, so I'm trying to stay on the side of caution here, but I've been told by numerous people that the Pittsburgh Steelers were in talks with the 49ers as late as 2 days ago when all that chaos was going on, that those conversations were being had. I don't know how close anything was, but there were conversations that were being had and that the Steelers were reaching out. And again, probably by the time that all that happened, it quieted down and Omar was like, yeah, there's nothing going on. Let me ask you this. How many more times do you think the Pittsburgh Steelers reach out to the San Francisco 49ers or the Denver Broncos or wherever before they somewhat give up on this situation and just accept a trade isn't going to happen?
Well, let's see. We've got, 4.5 months, 5 months maybe till the start of the season. I think, that's about as long as it'll take. They will. I think this is going to drag out well into the summer, to be quite honest. I think these are, other than, if they are able to get Cortland Sutton or Zay Jones or a DJ Chark or something before then, that'll obviously end the speculation. But if the Steelers, as long as the Steelers don't have another starting outside receiver, they are going to ask about those two guys, until they do. So I think this could drag out into the summer, into training camp. I think there could be a holdout or hold in on the 49ers side. And I think that could make things get a little bit, not ugly, but, it'll make things more difficult for the 49ers and it'll up the sense of urgency. I think, I'm not necessarily expecting anything to get done during the summer, but once August hits, that's when I think my antenna is really going to go up. And, as far as, 49ers rumors go.
Yes, I agree. I think that this is very easy. We are in a very simple spot for the 49ers to say, no, we are not trading either of these guys. We want to make it work because right now you could make it work. Come the end of July, early August, Brandon Ayuk isn't at training camp and the 49ers are starting to think, man, is he really not going to play this season? Are we really we're going to test that out and see if that's a real thing that happens here? That's when it becomes real. Because at that moment, the 49ers are backed against the wall and they have a decision to make. Are we going to let Brandon Ayuk walk a year from now and not get anything in exchange for him? Or are we going to make a trade right now and say, okay, either him or Deebo Samuel is gone because we have to pay the other or vice versa? That's how I view the situation. For right now, I don't expect anything to happen. I've been saying that. I just find it way too hard for the 49ers to lower their asking price and for the Steelers to try and convince them that anything should happen for a lesser value than they think it's going to happen, because the 49ers have nothing to worry about in May. There's just nothing to worry. Like, who cares if Brandon Ayuk doesn't show up to organize team activities or minicamp? Nobody cares. When it comes training camp and you're just thinking, man, they might actually hold out, this is a real thing, that's when you're going to start thinking, okay, look, it's time to start deciding whether or not we're going to just risk this or if we're going to get a deal done with another team and at least get some value for either him or Debo. And I think that's when at least that side of things can happen. Courtland Sutton's a different story. I feel like I don't know what to expect from a guy like Courtland Sutton. I don't understand why he's not showing up for training camp. Like, you have 2 years left on your deal. Isn't next year the year that you're supposed to be holding out, not this one? I don't know how that works out. I don't know. Interesting times. Guys, this is a public service announcement, and it is urgent. You think that you have mastered the look in sweatpants and joggers? Well, guess what, my friend? You have not. You are one step away from wearing pajamas in public, and your significant other is starting to think that you look like a slob. It's time to take your sexy ass and put it in some jeans. If you take anything away from today's show, it's that the perfect jean isn't just another pair of stiff, uncomfortable, nut-crushing pants. They have cracked the code on solving your denim difficulties, and it is time to rejoice. Check them out. Always looking good. The Perfect Jean makes great looking, perfect fitting jeans that are as comfortable as sweatpants and more stretchy than a kangaroo's pouch. It's made from a special denim fabric that's super soft, just like sweatpants, just like joggers, but it doesn't make you look like a slob. And the best part, they make 6 fits from skinny to thick. Waist sizes from 26 to 50 and lengths from 26 to 38. So whether you are a thick guy or a short king, or guess what, anything in between, they perfectly fit your body and accentuate your assets. Pun intended. Trust us when we say that these are truly fucking perfect jeans. Once you try them on, you'll never go back. Once again, boom. For a limited time, our listeners get 15% off their first order plus free shipping at theperfectjean.nyc, or just Google The Perfect Jean and use our code ALLSteelers15 for 15% off. Look it. I have been looking for a while. I have been talking to my fiance daily. I need to find a look. I've tried them all. I tried khakis. I tried joggers. I tried sweatpants. I tried shorts. Nothing fits me like the perfect jeans fit me. The Perfect Jean doesn't just stop there, though. They've revolutionized t-shirts as well. The Perfect Tee has just enough stretch to hide the beer belly while accentuating your arms and chest for that flawless look. It's soft like butter without shrinking in the wash like all your other t-shirts. It's just, perfect. The Perfect Jean always has free shipping, always has free exchanges, and always has free returns. So you can have peace of mind knowing that your order is completely risk-free. It's finally time to stop crushing your balls in uncomfortable jeans by going to theperfectjean.nyc. Our listeners get 15% off your first order plus free shipping, free returns, and free exchanges when you use our code ALLSteelers15 at checkout. That's 15% off for new customers at theperfectjean.nyc with promo code ALLSteelers15. After your purchase, they'll ask you where you heard about them. Please, please, please give us some support and tell them that we sent you. Fuck your khakis and get the Perfect Jean. Let me ask about another name that has popped up for the Pittsburgh Steelers. Yesterday, Benjamin Albright, NFL insider, Denver Broncos radio host, said the Steelers have reached out about Brandon Ayuk and Deebo Samuels. They've also called the Seattle Seahawks talking about a possible trade for DK Metcalf. I have been on record more than once this offseason saying DK Metcalf is a name I would avoid if I was the Pittsburgh Steelers, but they don't listen to me often, and I'm okay with that. They call about DK Metcalf. The kid's 26 years old. He's coming into, I think this is the second last year on his contract or on his current contract. And, I mean, there's no hiding the superstar in DK Metcalf. Do you think that's a real possibility for the Steelers? Do you think it's a smart move for them to call?
I don't think it's sure, it's a smart move to call. I don't know how, this is the most expensive in terms of option in terms of what you'd have to give up, I'd imagine. I don't know. There doesn't seem to be any beef between the Steelers and DK Metcalf. Doesn't seem like there's any holdout or hold in impending. Maybe they don't want to pay his next contract because it's going to be massive. But I don't think this is really like a very realistic possibility. I mean, I think it's let's kick the tires. Let's see what they're willing to ask for, or what they're willing to give up. I think it's more exploratory than anything else. I mean, it seems like the Steelers are just kind of reaching out to just about every team that has a superstar wide receiver and saying, out of curiosity, what would it take for you to part with this guy? And so I think that's what this more is. I like I said, I think this would be the most expensive in terms of what you'd have to give up. This is, I don't know if it's a first round pick, but it's at least a second. It's probably more than that. It's multiple picks over multiple years. So it'd be a hefty price tag. I'm curious, why do you think this is a name that the Steelers should avoid? I don't think I've heard that take from you.
So my thoughts on DK is I think he is a phenomenal football player, superstar. There are no questions asked there. Like, I think DK comes to the Pittsburgh Steelers and he is everything you'd want DK Metcalf to be. There's like, I'm not a critic of his talent. I'm a little bit worried about what happens if you put DK Metcalf and George Pickens on the field together, not off the field. I think DK Metcalf is a great leader off the field. I've heard great things about him as a teammate and as a professional. I think he does a great job there. On the field, he tends to get penalized almost all the time for being a hothead and unnecessary roughness penalties and hits after the whistle and getting into fights. And, that's great. And if you have one of those guys, you could work it out and control it. I think the Steelers looked at this offseason and said, man, we need some leadership because we got some guys that are getting a little bit out of control here. I don't know if that's the leadership that you're looking for George Pickens to say, because it's hard to sit here and say, hey, George, you got to be better when DK's out there hitting guys with his helmet, and you're going, well, what about him? They're like, yeah, but he's great. There's like, I don't know how to tell you that. That's where it worries me with DK is the on the field, like, penalties and the excessive penalties that he gets throughout a season. If you can work those out, which, I mean, if any team's it's probably going to be the Pittsburgh Steelers. I mean, great, but I don't know that you're going to be able to, and I just don't know the repercussions that brings to a young wide receiver core that already has some issues to work out.
That's interesting. I mean, I kind of didn't know about that side of DK. I mean, it makes sense. I don't know, man. Maybe that's just Steelers football. Maybe you're just being soft, and maybe the Steelers need a bit of an edge to their team now. I mean, that does make sense, though. I don't know. I think I agree, though. Like, if there's any team I think that can reel him in, if there's any head coach that can reel him in, it's probably Mike Tomlin, to be quite honest with you. Like, I think that he could do that, but it does make sense. I don't think that's something that the Steelers would want to deal with. I mean, for an offense that already, I wouldn't call them limited. I mean, especially with DK in that offense, I mean, it'd be pretty good. That's one of the more talented offenses I feel like that there is. I mean, at least in the AFC North, if not all around the AFC. So, like you said, it would be a great, talent investment, but there are other talented guys, right? That's the thing with the Steelers. Like, don't just get anyone, yes. Don't just get a superstar just to get a superstar, get the right one. Yes. Cause this is ideally a multi-year deal, but like, don't throw away this year because you got a guy instead of your guy. That's it's got to be a sound investment.
I agree. So I might be over exaggerating the penalty thing, but I don't know what like a number is. DK's been flagged 31 times in his career in 5 years. So I don't know, like a little bit more than 5 times a season. Maybe that's nothing, but maybe it's something. I have no idea. Maybe I'm over exaggerating it, but I agree with you. I think you have to go get your guy, not just a guy. I think DK could be your guy. Like, anybody who's out there trying to call for DK Metcalf is not like, you know what, we're going to settle for DK, Like, it's like, no, like, that's a great investment that a lot of teams would love to have. Does his cap hit worry you? 24.5 this year. I believe it's 29.5 next year for the Steelers. They could probably work out a quarterback situation to keep that cheap, but does that worry you at all?
It does worry me, like quite a bit, honestly. Like, I know I've said like salary cap's not real and it isn't, but man, you're having to sacrifice at some other positions where you need to make those investments to make room for DK Metcalf. And, it's just like when it comes down to DK versus, whatever it is for Cortland Sutton, I think it's what, a 17?
13 and 13 and a half.
Yeah. Like, I'm sorry. Like, I think you can raise your ceiling. You can get, Cortland Sutton is good enough. He's not a DK replacement. He's not necessarily a filler for him, but he is good enough for what the Steelers need, and at close to half the price. That seems like the better move in my book. Just 28 million, you said? Yeah.
24 and a half this year, 29 next year.
Yeah, that's ridiculous. Like the Steelers, I don't think can really afford that. That's a lot of money for a team that is already paying a bunch of guys a bunch of money, and then you got to figure out the quarterback situation next year. And I think you got extensions coming up or you should have extensions or new contracts coming.
Najee Harris is an option. James Daniels needs a contract next year. TJ's 2 years away. Minka's 3 years away. Cam, you got to decide what you're doing with Cam Hayward. Dante Jackson is only here on a 1-year deal. Like, yeah, there are definitely some names to watch. I agree. It does worry me. I think any wide receiver making $30 million is like, I just don't see the value in the position. I just really don't. Like, I think you could get younger guys for cheaper that make an impact. I mean, I was talking yesterday on a podcast talking about, why were there no trades when everybody was flying around the rumor mill talking about wide receiver trades? And it's just because, like, teams see the value in younger guys and that they don't want to pay and give up compensation for a guy that, yeah, it's great, but like, can't you develop somebody else into that? Can't you give somebody a year before they turn into a Brandon Ayuk? DK Metcalfs and these star wide receivers pop up all the time. And I get it. Like, you're not DK Metcalf and you're not Brandon Ayuk and you're not Deebo Samuel, but I mean, you got potential to be those guys. And I think that teams see that and look at it and say, I don't know if I'm willing to give that up. I will say, just on a positive note for this, I think the Steelers could make it work. Like, I think they'd have to bank on Justin Fields signing a 2-year, very limited deal and him turning into something, and they feeling good about Justin Fields in the future for the next 2 years. I think if that's the case, a 2-year deal works in their favor. I think anything farther than that, you're starting to get a little tricky because then you got to decide on George Pickens and so on and so forth. But I think if it's 2 years of a massive cap hit, you can make that work if you're the Pittsburgh Steelers without really like struggling to come up with the money. That is, if your quarterback situation remains limited. And I think that's a question, but it's a way. There's a way around it if you're the Steelers to make it work.
Yeah, be pretty tough though. Like it
would be.
It's and I think you're banking on a very specific set of circumstances falling your way, and know something's going to get screwed up, something's going to get messy, and it's not going to fall. That's the thing. Like, it's a very narrow hole in which or a very narrow set of circumstances in which you can fit a DK Metcalf type of contract, or really, I mean, any type of major receiver contract into their current salary cap situation, while also making sure that you have a quarterback that can utilize those guys properly.
Yeah, I agree. So let's talk about another name. A name that's is definitely cheaper, probably under $10 million. If I had to guess, maybe under $5 million if you go out and get him. Was released by the Jacksonville Jaguars yesterday, a name that immediately sparked some interest when it comes to Pittsburgh Steelers fans, and a potential wide receiver 2, 3/4, maybe, depending on where the Steelers wide receiver depth chart shakes out by the start and the end of the season. Zay Jones, guy who spent the last couple of years in Jacksonville, who was dealing with injuries last year, only played 9 games. The year before that, he had his best season in the NFL, catching 82 passes for 823 yards and 5 touchdowns. Not a bad year for a guy who I believe is a former second-round draft pick by the Buffalo Bills. You hear the name Zay Jones, an option for the Steelers and a valuable one if you believe he is?
Yeah, I don't hate this at all. I mean, I think the injury stuff is concerning just because I think he had like 3 different knee injuries or something last year. Like, that's a little concerning, especially for a guy who just turned 29. But I think, you bring this guy in on a 1-year deal, less than $10 million, and I think you feel pretty good about that. I mean, I think that's the thing. Like, yeah, we've been talking about superstar receivers, all week and all offseason, it feels like. I think the Steelers can get away with not a superstar, or not even really a star, just you need a veteran, a solid veteran, a reliable veteran, someone who can make some plays. Like, you need a healthy medium between Allen Robinson and, Brandon Ayuk, and I think Zay Jones is pretty close to that. So I'm pretty interested in this. I think you don't necessarily need a star, and I think Zay Jones could be extremely solid for you if you give him a chance and you put him in the right system. And just the price tag, I think, really appeals to me. That, along with, the production isn't awful. Like, this is like, if the Steelers have a third, let's call him a third receiver for right now. Let's assume Roman Wilson is awesome and has a great year. But if you have a guy who catches 600 yards, a handful of touchdowns, like 3 or 4, like, I feel like that's a perfect spot for you to be. Well, in that situation, you're assuming George Pickens turns into a number 1. And like I said, Roman Wilson has a great year, but for a third wide receiver, like, I will take that every day.
Yeah, I agree. I think Zay Jones comes in here as a number 3 and a good number 3. I think he's a better Allen Robinson that you could utilize in the slot and outside, depending on where you want to put Roman Wilson. I think best case scenario for the Steelers, you get a guy who could lower himself into a wide receiver 4 role while Calvin Austin expands into a wide receiver 3 role, and that works out well for the Steelers. I think that if you're looking at, free agent options, him and maybe a couple other names, but he really stands out above most of them. Like, people brought up Valdez Scantling yesterday in the live stream. They talked about DJ Chark, excuse me. I can never say that last name without saying Chalk. DJ Chark. Both of those are good options, I think, but I think they're both in the same category as Zay Jones, where you bring him in here, he's a wide receiver 3, and you kind of see what he does, and I think Zay Jones has had some success, and he's been reliable. Like, he's a guy that's going to catch, like, a couple of touchdowns. He's had some weird years and spent some time in Vegas with some rough quarterback situations, but once he arrived in Jacksonville, I felt like he was okay. He's going to be 29 years old, or he just turned 29 years old, so he'll be 29 during the season. I mean, I think that you could get him on a 1, maybe a 2-year deal and be totally fine with it. And then he's a better Van Jefferson. He's a better Quez Watkins. He's like your option that, like, okay, you have your bottom of the barrel guys. This is a real guy who can make an impact on your team. I'm not upset about that move. You think it could happen?
I think it could happen. But again, I don't think it's like one of those, I don't know. This isn't their first option, This isn't their first choice. So they are going to, I think, exhaust all of the trade opportunities, all of the other free agent signings. They're going to look literally everywhere else before they say, okay, let's go get Zay Jones, And maybe that comes back to bite him. Maybe some team picks up Zay Jones really early, but I don't really imagine that he's going to be the hottest name on the receiver market going forward.
No, I think that teams have their wide receivers filled, and at this point they're just, coasting, and the Steelers are really one of the last teams that are looking for wide receiver help, so I could see him sitting out there for a little while. And then, again, once training camp starts, even if you brought him in, and then you still acquire a wide receiver through a trade, like, okay, like, that stinks. Van Jefferson's on his way out. Rats. Quez Watkins doesn't make the roster. Man, that's a bummer. I think that you just load yourself up with wide receiver options. It's not a bad thing. I think it is a possibility for the Pittsburgh Steelers, but I agree. I think closer to training camp is where we're talking there. All right, before we head out of here, the Pittsburgh Steelers have until tomorrow at 4 p.m. to decide on Najee Harris and Justin Fields' 5th-year options. There's already been reports from Adam Schefter saying that the Steelers are not going to pick up Justin Fields' 5th-year option. That was an easy one to guess. Nobody saw that one coming. Najee Harris is a little bit less expensive, could come and stay in Pittsburgh for the next 2 years. He's 3-time back-to-back 1,000-yard rusher for the Pittsburgh Steelers behind some pretty god-awful offensive lines. This will probably be his best one. Plus, he's got a quarterback and an offensive coordinator now. Does anything change? Does your mind change? Has your mind changed when it comes to the Steelers picking up Najee Harris's 5th-year option? Do you expect it to happen?
I don't expect it to happen. And I think I said this earlier, but like if they were going to, it would have happened already, I think. Like Najee hasn't shown you anything over the past 2 months or whatever, or 3 or 4 months since the end of the season that tells you anything different about him as a player. So if you were going to sign him, I think everything that you need to know about Najee. The idea that they were waiting to make a decision or something like that, I think their decision was already made. And I think they're showing that by not, picking up his 5th-year option. I think they would have done it already. I don't really understand why they're not doing it. I mean, I feel like it's pretty affordable, especially for, like you said, a guy who has rushed for 1,000 yards in 3 straight seasons, in a better scheme, has some more support, and also hasn't shown any sign of slowing down. In fact, I would argue the opposite. He has gotten stronger over his first few years in the NFL. So I'm a little, not stunned, but I'm scratching my head a little bit. I don't know why they didn't do this, but it doesn't seem like they're going to do it at all.
Yeah, I agree. I don't think that they're going to pick up his 5th-year option. I agree with you that it does make some sense. I think I could argue for both sides. Like, it's easy to find a running back in the NFL. It's not very difficult. There are going to be free agent running backs next year. You could go and draft a running back next year. Like, there are options. There are options to find running backs, and maybe you're not going to get 1,000-yard rusher at running back, and I think that's where it comes into play. But I also think that Jaylen Warren is as good of a security blanket as it possibly comes, and if the Steelers are looking at Jaylen Warren and saying that's our future, we'll find a number 2. I don't think that that's an argument that you could really hold your ground against for a long time. I think that you could eventually going to be like, okay, yeah, I get it. Jaylen Warren's super cheap, and if you could go get a rookie that's even cheaper, great. That's a great backfield for almost nothing. But I agree with you. I think Najee Harris is, you don't pick up that 5th-year option, you're taking a risk that Najee Harris continues to grow and develop, and he's not on your roster in a year from now, and now you're struggling at running back on a team that needs a running back. Nick, I'm going to toss it down to you. Your thoughts, have they changed on Najee Harris's 5th-year option? Do you think the Steelers are going to pick it up?
No, I don't think the Steelers are going to pick it up. I mean, it's pretty obvious whenever you get the same exact answer from Omar Khan every time he's asked, and it's, well, I have till May 2nd. I mean, that's not... this isn't a high schooler waiting to push off his term paper. This is somebody who has decisions to make with a lot of financials. If he continues to say the same thing, you tend to believe him, especially when it's something like, oh, well, I have until this date to pick up this option, when we all know that it's unlikely to happen.
I agree. I think that he has given no indication that it's going. Omar Khan is, he's going to get there. Eventually, he's going to be really good at the smoke screens. Eventually, he will be an elite GM in terms of talking to the media. Right now, he is as easy to read through as any general manager in the NFL. Exactly what he means when he says things, even when he says absolutely nothing. And I think the May 2nd thing, it was pretty clear the Steelers were not going to pick up Najee Harris's 5th-year option, and they'll move forward. And it's a risk, and we'll see what happens. And I'm sure we'll get to talk to Najee at OTAs about whether or not he's happy about it or what he sees in his future. But for right now, I would not expect the Steelers to change their mind anytime soon when it comes to that guy, and we'll proceed into 2024 with him on the last year of his contract. With that said, we're going to head out of here. Thank you guys so much for jumping on to another episode of All Steelers Talk. Make sure to subscribe to us on YouTube, youtube.com/All Steelers Talk. Check us out anywhere you get your podcasts. And as we've been saying, find our new YouTube channel, youtube.com/All Steelers Talk, clips for even more All Steelers Talk. We will be back tomorrow. Enjoy another beautiful day in the Berg. Peace.